75 at the sanctuary and about 100 at Andel Inn. That hasn't changed. What about short-term rentals? The number of short-term rental licenses has remained virtually flat over the last 3 or 4 years. Bumps up and down a little bit, kind of between 1320 and 1370 and 1380. That hasn't really changed. Occupancy levels have been relatively flat during that period of time. So somewhat surprisingly, we're not experiencing a significant amount of visitor growth on the island, at least in terms of overnight paid accommodations. Interestingly enough, gate traffic has increased by about 100,000, I think, between 2023 and 2024, but 2024 is still below the peak of 2021. So we don't have a huge amount of additional traffic coming onto the island. Again, so what's driving this? We can look at the number of new certificates of occupancy that have been issued over the last 3 years, and it's about 300. So there have been about 300 new front doors coming onto the island. Some of those are full-time, some of those are part-time. The number of full-time residents, at least as measured by voter registration data, has not increased very much. So again, what's happening? What's driving this? It's not overnight visitors. It's not a real influx of new property owners, although at the margin there has been an increase in property owners, and maybe we need to learn the lesson that we're at a capacity boiling point right now, and every increase in dwelling unit substantially increases the pressure on the system as a whole. What appears to be happening, this is more anecdotal, in some of our surveys, when you talk to people on the golf course, pickleball course, or restaurants, or the KICA survey, is what seems to be driving this most is part-time owners spending relatively more time here than they did in the past. But that's just a snapshot of where we are today. My concern as a policymaker is that we have about 4,100 dwelling units on the island right now. We have 350 hotel rooms. We've got less than 1,400 short-term rentals. What's in the pipeline? There's a lot of additional single-family and multifamily development in the pipeline right now. Probably 100 to 150, 250 homes under construction. We have Ocean Pines being built. The Cape just came online. Seafields is just going to come online. We have a lot of potential development associated with the resort, not just additional hotel units, but also potential villas. Then we've got pressures external to us that have various forms of access to the island. Do we have the capacity to handle that, given where we are now, what we're feeling now? Do we need, do we need a 4-lane gate coming in? Do we need a 4-lane road coming into Kiawah Island? Do we need to build a lot of amenities or infrastructure? Or do we need to better manage the growth? Those are the kinds of challenges that I think we need to collectively face. That's one of the things that the Town's Planning Commission has been looking at. You'll see a lot of that reflected in the Kiawah Next document. And with that, I'll shut up. Kevin, if you want to react to any of that, otherwise we can just open it up.
The only thing I'll add to that is I think there are 2 changes that don't get measured. And one is people are driving farther. A lot of the construction traffic and homeowner traffic is going to the back of the island where it didn't. So every home they build in the back of the island, they've got to pass through all the other areas. I think that adds traffic. And I personally think, this is anecdotal, but there's a big problem with left-hand turns. I often am coming from Freshfields, and I can look up to the gate, and I can see the gates open, but I'm sitting behind 30 cars, and it's because we have to stop and let someone out. And I think what you have going with the traffic direction in the morning kind of proves that, because in the morning everything flies because we're keeping people moving. But as long as we have people stopping, so everything else has to stop so they can turn right or left, I think we're not prepared for that. I don't think a flyover is the answer, but I think that's going to be a challenge, especially when there's additional development down that street.
Well, it may be to push back a slightly different perspective on that. There's no question the fact that you have an intersection with stop signs right now, and whether it's stop signs or a traffic light, as one of our traffic engineers had originally recommended both there as well as outside Freshfield and Andell West, is a lot of that is dictated by the location of the gate and the turnaround time, the cycle time at the gate. So those are the kinds of issues that uniquely are going to require both organizations to work together to try to solve for.
Exactly. But yeah, if you want to open it up.
Who wants to go first? Are we shy wallflowers in this? Do you want us to tee up issues?
We're trying to be nice and let other people. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I had heard through Turtle Patrol that at least one or two mothers had died because of coyote attacks. Is that true?
One or two turtles?
Turtle mothers.
I don't know. I think Jim's our wildlife biologist and head of our wildlife and natural resources department could address that. There were two, I believe, at least two instances where turtles were killed. I don't know for a fact, but it's distinctly possible because it wasn't captured by camera or anything, that it could have been coyotes. I don't know. Jim, do you have anything to add?
Okay. Yeah, so regarding interactions between coyotes and adult female loggerheads, there were 4 different potential instances that occurred where there was interaction, apparent interaction based on tracks of both the turtle and the coyotes. There were 2 fatalities. We don't have any direct evidence that coyotes caused those fatalities. We just know that a coyote at least was in the vicinity at the time, same evening that the turtle ended up being killed. So obviously that's something that we've been looking at, talking with DNR about. You know, it's a very unusual thing for that to happen. There's actually not, you know, at least that any of us have been able to find another time where a coyote preyed on an adult loggerhead. So it's almost, I mean, it is unheard of. So again, we don't have direct evidence, but yeah, there were a couple of instances. And your other question was about tagged. Yep. So we've collared coyotes each of the last 2 years. So we had 2 last year and then two this year. So we've got one right now that has a collar. It's an adult female, and she lives on Kiawah and roams from Captain Sam's almost all the way to Ocean Park. So most of the island.
Mr. Hennessy.
Microphone coming.
Brad and Kevin, thanks for doing this. I think it's very helpful. Brad, I had a question for you. KICA, as an association, has very limited footprint. Could you talk a little bit about how much property the town owns and what restrictions, legal, practical, operational, might exist to use some of that land?
Outside the gate?
Outside the gate.
Outside or inside, does it matter?
I'm sorry?
Does it matter?
Well, no, but it's my impression, which may or may not be correct, that most of the land that the town owns is outside the gate.
Okay.
So that was the focus of my question.
Okay, so, but I might take it a little bit more broadly
Okay, that's fair.
than that, Paul. So it's a good question, and that's one of the issues that relates to, like, when somebody says the town needs to build more amenities, and we can talk a little bit about the proposed, or now I think planned, Civic and Cultural Center addition wing. But first, the town's geographic boundaries. It's surprising to me a lot of people don't really realize this is not just Kiawah Island. It includes Freshfields Village, not just the shopping area, but also Seafields and MUSC and 4 or 5 undeveloped parcels in and around Freshfields. And it includes this 21 acres of this municipal center complex, Kiawah Island Parkway. It includes the roundabout as well, and 2 miles of Kiawah Island Parkway and right-of-way associated with that, and Beachwalker Drive and a right-of-way associated with that. That's all the land that that's the town. That's the town's municipal boundaries. So our municipal boundaries circle around the island and kind of the marsh areas and things like that. The other thing I would note about our jurisdiction is that somewhat unique because we're an island bordering the ocean and navigable waterways. You know, the town's powers are derived from the state, and we have home rule form of government here, and the state, the municipality, unless otherwise prescribed by state or federal law, has the ability to enact ordinances and enforce ordinances to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens within its jurisdictional boundaries. By statute, interestingly enough, our jurisdictional boundaries by state statute go a mile out into the Atlantic Ocean and halfway around navigable waterways. So that's just framing the town's boundaries. In terms of land that we own, it's just this 21 acres, the municipal center complex, the traffic circle, the roundabout, and Kiawah Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. That's it right now. That could change. That could change by dint of the town acquiring additional property, exercising eminent domain with regard to additional property, but that's all the town owns right now, Paul. There are issues as to the utility of this, and we're trying to figure out as a council and as a town how to better utilize at least this 21 acres. It's the only thing that we can really, at this point in time, they have that we can build on or develop to make it more of an asset for the community as a whole, to try to address some of these issues with regard to having sufficient community meeting space and gathering space, and also to address some accessibility issues that Kevin can talk about with regard to gate access issues. I don't know if that helpful and addresses your, okay.
I guess it's a good time to bring it up. My concern would be with gate access and illegal entry and use of our island. I looked around to see if my friend Roger was here, because he always talks about, that he needs to encourage people to come and use his facilities, and his, he's in charge of the whole resort. We have a problem, unlike Seabrook, because we have a resort, and their security coming on to Seabrook is just crazy. You almost have to leave your firstborn child there when you come in. But what we do is we give a pass out to people if they say simply that they want to go for lunch at the sanctuary. And we have no way of taking care of that collectively, because if they get in and park on resort property, the home association doesn't have any way of threatening to tow if you're illegally there, or put a wheel lock on. I don't even know if we can do that legally. There's a couple of suggestions, maybe, to give a colored entry pass for a particular location, and maybe even a time frame. If you're going for lunch, give them 4 hours, find a parking place, go to the sanctuary, have lunch, and that it's not an all-day pass, and it's not a pass down to the beach. One of the controlling things that we have is on Betsy Carson, there's a neon sign out there which says the county park is open and so forth. But what triggers it, the parking problem, is when it says that the parking lot is full. So I use the analogy of Vacation, the movie. If you're coming onto our island from, let's say, Folly Beach or James Island, and you have your kids in the back and they got their sand pails and their beach umbrellas, and then you see that sign that says parking lot full, you don't turn around in the back seat and say, well, I'm sorry, kids, we'll have to come back another day, it's full. The first thing you do is think of some way to get on the island and park someplace. So I think if you could kind of work together and think about that, and of course Roger would have to cooperate, because if they park on resort property, the home association doesn't have any way of putting up a sign that says you'll be towed if you're illegally here, okay, because it's up to them. So we have no control. But these people are coming in, and it's wide known around the peninsula that all you have to say is you're going in for lunch and you've got an all-day pass. Secondly, the resort does not send the tea times to the gate. Seabrook will have that at their disposal, and they will check everybody in to see if you have a tea time. Okay, but we've got 5 courses, so every one of them would have to report into the gate, and you'd have to check lists, and of course that delays everything, and people don't care for that either. But I think we're really being taken advantage of, and we haven't found a cure for it. And so when I mentioned maybe a colored pass for where you're going, if you're found at a different location that doesn't have that color, there ought to be some way to enforce that by simply towing somebody or putting a wheel lock on. And I'm telling you, the message would get out to the whole peninsula if only one person gets towed, or if there's one wheel lock that they have to be inconvenienced by. That word will be all over the island, just like it is now that you can get in any way you want.
Why don't you let me address the gate access process that we're working on. I could have kicked off with this. There's a number of priorities that we announce every year at the beginning of the KICA term, or at least we have the last 2 years. The 3 biggest right now to me are the spit, which I can tell you progress is happening, ARB turnover, which I can tell you progress is not happening, but we're looking at options. And the third one, which Brad and I talked about years ago when we both took our offices, was the front gate, which is really the nexus for the whole island, both figuratively and literally. We just put out a policy, and we're trying to bring, I guess, some structure back to the gate. I think as we dug into it as a board, we were a little bit surprised that over the years it's evolved into a number of different ways. And the policy that we just released is really 3-part. There's only 3 types of people, in our opinion, come on the island. You own here, you work for people that own here, or you're a guest. That's simple. Everyone that owns here will continue to have an RFID tag. Right now we have a variety of RFID tags, and those are the little electronic things that go in your car. Everyone's going to be required to have a KICA RFID tag under the current draft of the proposal. Right now we have the club also issuing tags, but then they don't go through our systems. We can't count them. We can't control it. We can't turn them off if they don't pay their fees, which hasn't been a problem, but it seemed to us the first thing we have to do is centralize all owners onto one system. The second is people who work here. That actually works pretty well now. We have a lot of people that everything from maid services to general contractors that get annual passes from KICA or day passes from KICA. We check their insurance, they pay fees. We actually collect a lot of money from these tags. It's a big part of our reserves, and we don't think that'll change. So the first 2 will be altered, hopefully by year end if we stay on track, and that's what I call the right gate. Everyone that comes through the right gate should have a tag. They should never stop. It should work really fluidly, and we're hoping that'll improve things. Then you have the left gate, which we're now calling guests, and that's everyone from day guests to long-term guests. There were guests being given tags for a year, for months, for days. That's a lot of the people you're talking about. So how do we get our arms around that? First thing we want is no one to stop. So we're trying to, that piece will be implemented over a year or two, but where can we use QR codes? So for instance, if someone wants to come in and buy a hat, what we're trying to negotiate is they will have to go to the resort, they will have to log into the resort, give their name, give their license plate number. A QR code will be electronically sent to them. They go to the gate, they hold up the QR code, it goes green, and they go through. If someone is unwilling or unable to actually go and log themselves in online, we're going to have an off-site gate pass office. So that you show up, you didn't read anything, you don't have your pass, you got to go down to KICA, you got to get your pass and log yourself in there. So when you come back to the gate, you show your QR code, boom, you're through. We think that'll help things at the front gate. So then we've now compressed the problem to who are we going to give guest passes to? Obviously, anyone who's a guest of an owner, just like right now, you go, you log your guest in, I log in my friends and family, they come up, they'll have a QR code, they go through. Anyone who's come to the resort, tea times, they will go through the resort system. Not today, but we're trying to create the policy and then implement it over a couple years. They will go to the resort, they will log into the resort will electronically talk to the front gate, they will get their QR code on their phone or via email, they will get through. So really we get down to the hardest part of the problem are people that come in, and we don't know how to stop someone that if they really want to come to the gate and lie and say they're just here to buy a hat and then go to the beach, haven't figured that last piece out. And the other piece, I think that when I go through the comments, the vast majority of comments I've received, that I've written and what people have called me are in favor of this. The last piece are what I call the permanent guests. They live in Seafields, they live in Kiawah River Estates, they live in other areas that they are not Kiawah owners, but they would like to come in Kiawah as frequently as they like. And right now, what's on the table is that they will have to call an owner will call in a day pass for them. If they're coming for the day, we'll call in a multi-night pass for them if they are staying at their house. And then they will be able to get a QR code on their phone, flag it, and come in. But we think that gives us it doesn't solve all our issues, but it probably solves 95% of them. A lot of improvements, a lot of efficiency. I think if we create those efficiencies, I think the resort will be accepting of it because it's a better experience for their guests as well. If we can get that all in place, then it really gives us the data and the structure of what we need to figure out those last couple problems, if they even are a problem. Because if we had the data and we found that the number of people that showed up at the gate for a day pass just for a restaurant was 15 a day, it may not merit the investment. But until we have structure and data and control over the situation, it's hard to even fix that last piece.
If I could just make one observation. I mean, gate access issues are uniquely the province of KICA, the operation of the general covenants and the KICA covenants and the board's authority to manage access and use of common properties owned by KICA. I'm a little bit concerned because I think there's an undercurrent of some of these issues in the way you phrased the question at the outset or the issue. You said, we have a problem compared to Seabrook. We certainly have a different set of issues compared to Seabrook. I'm a little concerned about the phrasing "a problem," because the resort's been here. It's been here before most property owners. It is a significant stakeholder for the community. The success of the resort benefits the community as a whole. It presents a unique set of challenges. But the fact of the matter is, and even consistent with the covenants, is anybody in the world can make a reservation to stay at the sanctuary. Anybody in the world can come and get a tea time. Anybody in the world can get an ocean, make a reservation at the Atlantic Room or the Ocean Room. That is a fact, and the question is how best to manage that process. The other challenge is you've got a convention center here. We've got a big convention coming up. That's the South Carolina International Trade Conference. We're going to have several hundred people on the island associated with that particular event. That's kind of a fact of life with regard to having a 5-star world-class resort with the facilities it does on Kiawah Island. I think we got to disabuse ourselves of the notion that this is somehow, that Kiawah Island in its entirety is some kind of fortress in a private, it's semi-private at best. We have, you know, public access through Beachwalker County Park and public access on Kiawah Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. Anybody in the world, the beaches from mean high tide line seaward are state-owned property. They're public property. So somebody, if 1 million people want to come to get off boats and swim up to our beach and walk along a beach, they're entitled to do so. There's nothing that KICA can do about that. There's nothing the town can do about that. And the resort itself is, by legal definition under various federal laws, a public accommodation. So it's just managing all of that, but I think we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that we are and should be like Seabrook, because we're not.
Yeah, we cannot deny anyone access to the island. All we can really do is try to manage the way they come in and the records we keep.
Well, I understand that probably as well as anybody that's been on the island for 20 years. There's no comparison between the two. I simply mentioned that because of the gate process they use, but it's a little bit easier without having a resort or some kind of a commercial activity on. And we've heard all along that we need to deal with the resort because they pay a lot of assessments and they keep us in business. And over the years, and you mentioned something about international travel, their advertising system has gone all over the country, especially with all the tournaments we've had and how they've increased their opportunities. Now, another one we may have to be concerned about is the building they're doing with bowling alley and some other activities on the island. That how do we control just anybody coming in and saying they want to bowl a lane?
I don't think we can stop them, but we can ask them to
Right,
register.
exactly. Well, I shouldn't say stop it, because I know we can't and we shouldn't. But let me just mention.
Can we, if you
Yeah,
would
just so we
mind,
can
if we
keep
could give
everyone
other
in.
folks a chance. And I want to ask Meredith, is there anybody online with a question first? Make sure we get anybody online.
I'm sorry, I want to mention 2 words, and it'll startle everybody. A gate pass. Many gated communities up and down the coast charge a fee just to come onto the island for whatever purpose, $9 or something, and they pay that, but it's reimbursable. If you go and have lunch, you just get it validated, just like if you went downtown to a parking lot to the hospital, you validate your
Let me
pass.
say, if we have all the systems in place, a board can consider that. But right now, right now it's like we don't have enough infrastructure in place and control in place to even be able to administer some of those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for doing this. Very helpful. I want to go back to the growth discussion. And just from listening to you, it appears that maybe the greatest growth challenge is traffic, although I'd have to laugh about traffic relative to a lot of other communities in this country.
We have a lot of first world problems here.
Yeah.
Or West Ashley, for
And,
that matter.
and quite frankly, I wouldn't even put growth concerns like tea times and restaurant reservations on a growth challenge. I mean, if somebody doesn't feel they have enough tea times, find yourself at a nice private course over in Aiken. Let's just put, to be blunt about it. But what about other infrastructure, such as electric and the size of our substation, our water, which is, pumping facilities, and wastewater. And the first 2 are very reliant on John's Island and other sources. And are there any design issues there? So that's the total footprint of Kiawah. And were they designed with a view that occupancy may be significantly higher than it has been in prior years?
A great question. Earlier this year, the town, reconstituted. It had been moribund for a number of years. What was called a Public Works Committee. We established an Infrastructure and Public Works Committee. Job one, there were two job ones. One of the job ones was dealing with our telecommunications infrastructure, which somewhat relates to this, and that's why we've been focused on modifying our cell tower ordinance and having various conversations with the tower owners as well as cell providers to provide better cell coverage and emergency management services coverage across the island. But as part and parcel of that, we've been having conversations with all of the utility providers, water, wastewater, Berkeley Electric, et cetera, to try to better understand what essentially the resiliency of the capacity and resiliency of their systems are. May surprise a lot of people that we have, within the town of Kiawah Island, 3 different water and 2 different wastewater service providers. Kiawah Island Utility provides water and wastewater services on the island proper, but it gets its water from St. John's Water. This particular complex gets water from St. John's Water. It's actually on septic, which is its own problem, which we're trying to address. Seabrook Island Utility actually provides water and wastewater, and they get their water from St. John's Water to all of the Freshfields Village area, including Seafields and MUSC. And then, of course, we have Berkeley Electric with 2 different substations coming across onto the island and to Freshfields Village. Ongoing conversations about resiliency issues. One of the things that we've learned throughout this process is, unlike most municipalities, we don't have franchise agreements in place with all these entities. And to the extent the ones we do, those are pretty dated and don't have a lot of the more modern provisions one would typically see in franchise agreements. So one of the action items on the town's agenda next Tuesday is, in fact, some minor tweaks at this juncture to our franchise, putting in place a new utilities franchise ordinance requirement. There's one embedded in our license requirement anyway, and then we'll begin to build that out with more comprehensive franchise ordinance and franchise agreements. But as of now, I'm at least reasonably satisfied that all of our utility providers have more than sufficient capacity to handle not only what current loads, but future growth. Kiawah Island Utility, the original kind of capacity that was built into the system was about 7,000 dwelling units, I think, on Kiawah Island. We're not going to get near that. We're probably going to top out at less than 5,000. So that's not a capacity issue. Seabrook Island Utility has a lot of capacity as well. Berkeley's building new capacity capability. So, but it's something that we are now very focused on.
Just a final comment, just for awareness. The co-ops, to include Berkeley, are not required to present an infrastructure resources plan to the state. And water and wastewater companies have almost never been required to do that. In our case, the entity that does that for us is Santee Cooper, which is a generation and transmission co-op, and because they're under the really looked after by the state legislature, they help with that. But what that means to us, being on the end of the line, if you want to think about the distribution line of the electric energy coming through Johns Island, we're very dependent upon Berkeley and its ability to manage the growth on Johns Island so that once it gets to our substations, we actually have enough electric energy at the right voltage and current. water and wastewater are kind of different issues, and they've done a lot of work to improve water on John's Island. That's St. John's Water, and then wastewater, quite frankly, is a very local issue because you don't want to be pumping that out too far. It's very inefficient. But I just think we need to be attentive to this. Some of the Kiawah's infrastructure challenges are not necessarily Kiawah. They're John's Island and beyond.
That's all I can say is we're trying to be attentive. The ability to affect outcomes is dependent a lot on a lot of issues external to Kiawah and state law constraints and whether and how we can regulate or interact with utility providers. But this last year, with members of the Infrastructure and Public Works Committee, we're trying to pay attention to all of these issues.
Two unrelated questions. One, Kevin, and I know there's been a lot of discussion at the board. You were talking about the gate access and the issues with the resort. Can you go a little more detail about how you're going to address the issues with the club? I know that's a sort of a tough subject, but because Kiawah Island club members, the KICA is one set, and then the potential Orange Hill and Kiawah Island club members that live elsewhere.
Sure.
And how they have access.
Sure. So if you go back and you look at my three groups, there's owners, people who work for owners, and people who are guests of owners. Obviously, everyone in KICA is an owner, including club members who are owners, if they are owners. And then a subset of that is KICA. There was a contract signed in like the early 2000s that essentially gave KICA members the same rights as KICA members to enter the front gate. So at some point, they diverged about 5 years ago and started issuing their own passes, which I think we've kind of lost control of the situation. We're going to ask all the KICA members and any Kiawah Island club member that's using a Kiawah Island issued club pass to come through the KICA gate to have a KICA pass. So everyone will have a KICA pass, whether they live in KICA or they live on KICA or own on KICA or own on Kiawah. It's that simple. Those people can come through the gate. If you do not fall into one of those two categories, you are a guest, and you will not have an RFID tag. You will either go through the resort and log in at tea time, or you will call a friend, and they will log you into the system, and you will be a guest, and you will come through the left lane as a guest. So everyone with RFIDs that are own or work for owners will go on one side, and everyone who's a guest will go through the other.
I know it's a work.
This hasn't been passed. This is the plan that we put out as a draft.
I know it's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
The other issue I want to just ask about, Brad, and this is more, I don't know if it's really a question, but a suggestion. So you've been probably seeing on Kiawah all the email traffic about this new overlay, beach overlay, and all the signs went up and down, were put up all up and down the island and got everybody like, what's going on? We don't know anything about it. I tried to go online using the site that's referenced in the letter you all sent, and it doesn't work. Now, somebody else found another access to get that information, and I read it, and I think I'm maybe not that smart, but I think it would be helpful for folks to have just a summary of what this is really all about that's published so that folks can understand it, because there's a lot of smart people reading it and really not quite understanding why we're doing this now, what's going on, and I think that's a town question. I don't know if KICA's involved.
No, I'm interested in the answer as well.
Good for you.
I had a sign in my front yard, so.
Obviously, I've seen the IKEA traffic regarding this, Phil. Thank you for that question. Now, if there's administrative error on our part that we put in a link that doesn't work, that's on us, and we need to try to fix and address that. You can certainly go on to the town's website in the planning and zoning section, and you'll get all the information related to this one particular zoning change proposal, the beachfront overlay. I don't know if Stephanie's here, but I don't know how many we have on this upcoming agenda. You know, at least half a dozen, probably half a dozen. Maybe we've moved off one or two to the next month. But proposed zoning changes, some on first reading, some on second reading. The Planning Commission has been very, very active. I would note with respect to all of the Planning Commission's activities, including with regard to the beach overlay proposal that's going to be on Council's agenda for first reading, is that those have been discussed at multiple Planning Commission meetings, all of which matters of public record. So anybody can attend any Planning Commission meeting and would be able to get information regarding these issues. There's also, it's a public process. So we'll have first reading. The following month, we're going to have a public hearing on this particular zoning matter. Whether or not we have second reading at the time, assuming we approve this on first reading, there will be ample opportunity to continue to comment. The reason you get those zoning notices is that's required by law. You're required whenever there's zoning that impacts a particular property or adjacent property, you have to post notices. So that's procedurally that there's been a fair amount of discussion about this. I've referenced not the specifics of this beachfront overlay zoning proposal, but the town's intent and desire to address a wide range of issues to protect our critical beachfront, lack of a better term, infrastructure. That started with our beach management, changes to our beach management ordinance, which is outside the zoning code. This is step 2 in that regard. So I would say there's been a fair amount of discussion over this over the course of the last several months. In terms of some, I'm reading what John provided, and I think the first 2 pages of the case information are pretty straightforward. I think they're...
What's the problem you're trying to solve?
Address. You have to talk to the Planning Commission, because this is their recommendation, but based upon my conversations with the Planning Commission, as well as the issues, good question, that we've surfaced before, is that we have had a hodgepodge of regulatory standards related to development along the beachfront. I mean, John summarizes about 7 or 8 bullets, what the planning administrator, planning department sent out. A couple of problems in that regard. The town's ability to zone in order to respond to change conditions, whether it's climatic conditions, sea level rise, what have you, changes in habitat, protecting flora and fauna, aesthetic character, et cetera, has been constrained, substantially constrained by 2 long-standing development agreements covering much of the island. That's number 1. So, for example, the Cape the developer was able to build right up against the setback line, the jurisdictional setback line, because of the development agreement. If this town had, this Planning Commission and Town Council had approved this beach overlay years ago, they could have done that. It wouldn't have applied to that particular property. I would also note that there are, I believe, I'm not a planning administrator or zoning expert, but I think we have 7 different zoning districts along the beachfront, all with different setback requirements and other requirements. My understanding is this is a pretty standard tool to be utilized by particularly coastal communities. Florida towns have them, even Michigan towns have them along Lake Michigan, et cetera, to provide some consistency along critical areas. Sometimes it's in the city of Charleston, it may be historical. For coastal communities, it's to protect the health and integrity of the dune and beach system, property values, aesthetics, natural habitat for wildlife, et cetera, so you have some consistency across the beachfront.
Just follow. I appreciate. See, that was the kind of conversation I was hoping to hear, because a lot of us don't have time to go to every planning meeting. You all, I mean, I don't know how you keep up with all this stuff, frankly. I mean, I barely keep up with the KICA board meetings and the infrastructure committee meetings that I go to. But that kind of conversation is, I think, what people were looking to hear. This just sort of dropped out of the sky for most people. They don't go to the planning and they don't know about it, and all of a sudden there's boards all over, signs everywhere along the streets.
Well,
And so it just took people by surprise.
Phil, I mean, once upon a time, when I had other time on my hand, I used to come to things like the Planning Commission meeting and all, and I would write the kind of thing that you're talking about. In Charleston County, a lot of people subscribe to John's Island Advocate. You know, you have one individual, John Zlogar, that takes it upon himself to do that and provide that, you know, summary of everything the Planning Commission's doing. I don't think the Planning Commission has the capability, nor does staff, nor do I. We'll talk about these things at the council meeting. We'll try to understand them ourselves and explain them as best we can. But to re-summarize in a way that, I mean, I guess is more digestible for people than the standard process that we use.
Isn't that the purpose of the signs?
But-
I mean, the reason, well, I was going to say, the reason they put the signs out is for all the people that don't go to the planning committee to alert them.
So yeah,
the process is actually working, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, so.
Just following up, and I know it was a mistake that the access on, or the website link was just not valid. I've not seen what John wrote, so I have to dig that out of somewhere. But one quick
You don't have to dig very hard. It's all, we have a planning and zoning section, and it's
found
all there. It's like
I
one
understand,
link.
Brad, but I got a letter saying, here's how you find it, and it wasn't working.
Okay, then that's on us, and we'll look into that and try to make sure that doesn't happen again, Phil.
Well, I do want to ask a quick question. I know you're switching to .gov for everything.
We have. We've already migrated.
On here it says Toki planning at KICAisland.org.
Okay, that is, thank you for pointing that out. That's on us. We'll try to address that.
Strongly worded letter to follow.
Yes. Thank you. Any questions online, Meredith? No? Okay. Yes, sir.
No.
Well, no, a little bit. I mean, that's it. It's just, the question was, okay, the question was, can we speak a little bit more about the spit? There's a limited amount in what we can say. As I've noted at previous council meetings, we are currently in a mediation, a settlement discussion process with multiple parties related to the spit, and that is covered by confidentiality under South Carolina state law. So we're constrained to talk about the details of that mediation process. What I can tell you is what is publicly available information, which I had previously conveyed, which I will reiterate now, is the mediation is related to two pieces of litigation. One, that the town, KICA, and the Kiawah Conservancy initiated against the property owner of the spit, Kiawah Partners or Kiawah Resort Associates, with regard to what we believed were clear obligations under the now expired ARDA to, number one, convey portions of the spit, the lowlands and marshlands, to KICA, and two, to put the remaining highlands into a conservation easement in favor of the Kiawah Conservancy. And those were supposed to be done at the end of the development agreement. That did not occur. That's why we initiated the litigation to enforce those obligations. There's a separate piece of litigation that's been sitting out there for about 18 years now, that the predecessor to the current Kiawah Partners initiated against the state of South Carolina for a regulatory takings case when permits were denied to build a revetment that would have allowed a road to be constructed across the isthmus and 50 homes to be built on Captain Sam Spit. Those two pieces of litigation have now been conflated into this settlement agreement set of discussions. All I can say is, and what I said before is, based upon the settlement discussions, I think there is a potential framework or path forward that will achieve what I said were the town's principal objectives, which were to preserve the spit in its largely natural state, and 2, to protect continued public access to Beachwalker County Park and to the beachfront. But I can't offer any more details than that, other than that is still our objective, and my hope would be any mediation settlement agreement would achieve those objectives, but ultimately settlement agreements involve some give and take. So just have to understand and appreciate that. Mr. Reinhardt. Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, but a separate topic, but if you could comment on cell phone infrastructure for the east end of the island.
Yeah, if you could comment briefly on maybe the timing for cell phone infrastructure, which is pretty essential. There are several hundred residents out there that are in a dead zone.
So, Mr. Reinhardt, I'll publicly congratulate him on his hole-in-one this past Saturday. I'm still waiting for my first one. We touched upon it a little bit earlier. The town recently approved changes to our ordinance that were necessary in order for the cell tower owners and cell providers to consider making the investment in additional infrastructure. The principal constraint has been the limits on cell tower height and requirements for all cell towers to be in a stealth configuration. We actually have 7 cell tower facilities on Kiawah Island, but their ability to deliver 5G and clear signals is constrained substantially. It's my understanding, I'm not an RF engineer, by the fact that the cell towers one is 165 feet or thereabouts at soar rail, but the rest are 80, 90, barely above the tree canopy. The expectation is that, particularly with regard to the ocean course in the east end of the island, that there was an opportunity for a drop and swap cell tower to replace the one that's out there. And once that's done, it'll be tall enough that all cell tower providers will be, because they have to be 10 feet below each other, will be incented to put in infrastructure and 5G capable infrastructure. And then I would think that we'd probably have at least one more of those cell towers elsewhere on the island, maybe at the Berkeley Electric site just off of Governor's Drive.
My other question was, I wanted to ask about traffic, speed limits, not traffic, speed limits. I feel that, and maybe my timing was just this summer, I saw more accidents that I've ever seen on the island. Roads were closed, we had to be deterred, and I've saw more bikers on the roads than I've ever seen before. And maybe, again, it was just my timing. I love the public service or safety report we get every month. That's interesting reading. Just wanting to know if that was true in terms of the number of accidents. And, of course, we have all the speed limit flashing signs. Do we feel like that's working? And what are we...
Well, do you want to take it first? Do you want me to? We're both doing.
I think we're doing what we can at KICA. We're limited to what we can. We're not police, and we're limited to what we can do. I will throw in that one of the big problems we had with the traffic enforcement was that you could give warning letters to owners because we have their license plates, and we could give it to people who work on the island because we have their license plates, but people found it unacceptable that all the guests could just get away with whatever they wanted. And that's one of the smaller benefits of the gate access plan is if we have everyone's license plate, and we do have someone going 65 miles an hour, we know who they are and we can contact them. So this is all, we're trying to mesh some of these capabilities of KICA together. But right now, that's where we stand on speed enforcement, warning letters and blinking lights. But please.
From the town's perspective, speed enforcement has been a recent priority, not because there have been so many accidents, no, there have been more, but there certainly have been some, both with regard to vehicle-to-vehicle collisions as well as some vehicle-to-bicycle. That's kind of, some of those relate to maybe not vehicle behavior or speed as much as it is the bicyclist behavior, but it could be a combination of both. But there's no question, for some reason, people seem to feel the need, or too many actors seem to feel the need to go much further than posted speed limits. Now, enforcement. KICA does have the ability to enforce its rules and regulations against property owners or as a gate access issue, but they cannot write traffic tickets. Only a SLED certified law enforcement officer is able to write, it's weird terminology. Writing a traffic ticket is something called a custodial arrest. And only CCSO is able to do that. On private roads, they can't enforce those traffic laws at all unless specifically permitted by the property owner, which occasionally KICA does invite requests that CCSO comes onto the island. CCSO can write traffic tickets along Betsy Carrison and Kiawah Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive, both as part of their regular duty activities, which they do, as well as when we request off-duty services, additional coverage, which we do. And a point of emphasis for that off-duty coverage is traffic-related enforcement. So you will see, or you should have seen, more traffic enforcement activities ongoing over the last few months. With regard to the speed monitor signs, they collect, we get a lot of data through that. What we learn is still too many people are going well above the speed limit coming up to those.
Way too fast.
Yeah, in fact, I look back as I was just coming around the Mingo curve, saw somebody coming on, I was going off island, and coming around the curve at 48 on there, where it's posted 25. There's some of that. But what the speed monitors, what the data also shows is they're effective. They get people to slow down. So we think we're doing what we can in order to address some of these issues, but ultimately, neither the town, since we don't have our own police department, nor KICA are able to directly enforce the speed limits.
I want to ask one more question. Yeah. Kind of along those lines, this is not important, but it is sort of to me. Is there a outdoor lighting ordinance by the town in terms of when your outdoor lights have to be off? My understanding, we all know the turtles, it has to be off at 9. I was under the understanding that everybody's outdoor lights had to be turned off at 11. Is that true, or is that just a...
That may or may not be a KICA regulation or an ARB requirement. There is no town ordinance with regard to lighting other than with respect to turtle patrol.
Okay, thank you.
Turtles.
On the beach, there are different rules.
Beachfront lighting. Wow.
Read it an hour, so one more. 2 more. Jim?
No, Jim.
Cause a little trouble. First of all, for those who own property along the beach, I don't know, you probably want to check and see if the zoning law would render your property non-conforming in case of a casualty. So unfortunately, I'm not an owner along the beach, but for those who do, that would be a suggestion, just to make sure you don't become non-conforming. With respect to following up on, to beat a dead horse a bit on the issues with the resort and guests and the impact of those guests on our infrastructure, the gate, et cetera, do you think that the commercial interests on Kiawah are paying the appropriate share of costs associated with the impact that they're creating, understanding that the arrangement, the financial arrangements were made back in 1970 something, and really not tied to the ultimate impact of that the commercial interests versus the homeowners have on the island. And secondly, as future development happens, is there an agreement or something in place that will compel the future development to provide the extra infrastructure that's needed, at their expense and not at the homeowner's expense? I think over time the homeowners have assumed a large burden of everything that's happened on the island financially. I'm just wondering if there are any thoughts about how that might be balanced out.
I think that, the first is the premise of your question is it a fair amount?
Appropriate. I hate to, I don't
Well,
like the
it's-
word. Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
So I don't know how to judge that other than numerically. And there is a formula in the covenants. Right now I might call on Paul, but between the gate pass income and the actual assessments they pay, it's a pretty good chunk of our budget, right? Let's just hypothetically say it's 25%, hypothetically. Is that right or wrong? Do we think that's fair? Do we think it's more? I think that's for boards to debate, and maybe it is a good debate. But do we think that the damage to the roads or the infrastructure and the trails is done by 75% homeowners and 25% commercial? I don't know. That's a pretty tough one, but it's probably worth studying, because the first is how much do we want to push on them and how much should the residents pay for? The second would be if we think that's inappropriate, it would have to be through a covenant change that we adjust that, or better enforcement, which I know you've talked about, which is just really zeroing in on the formula and making sure we're getting every last dollar that we deserve from either side.
It's a good question, Jim. Apart from the issue of the appropriate amount of assessments paid relative to usage of common property, there's a municipal aspect to all of this as well. We do have an ordinance that allows the imposition of impact fees. There are other instances of which there are exactions imposed upon developers in order to deal with infrastructure associated with new development. There are a host of issues with regard to, under South Carolina state law, particularly as interpreted by the courts, of imposing impact fees. Where it typically comes up is in the context of negotiated development agreements rather than by right. So when you have development agreements or planned developments, there are typically discussions that occur between the developer and the municipality or the county about ensuring that there is sufficient infrastructure built to accommodate all the additional development. In my view, it's my personal view, those issues were not adequately addressed in the prior development agreements. And that's been an issue. Notwithstanding all the growth, there was no requirement on the developers to build or help contribute to building, whether it's a third lane onto the Kiawah Island or Kiawah Island Parkway, or traffic circles at Kiawah Beach Drive and Kiawah Island Parkway, etc. Compare and contrast, and this isn't necessarily just related to infrastructure, but a lot of people talked about Orange Hill, the development just on Johns Island that will be a Kiawah Island Club property. As part of the negotiations to get county approval for that, the developer ended up having to conserve hundreds of acres of land, had to put in, John will have this specific, more than $2 million into various affordable housing funds, other things. They negotiated issues with regard to increasing the ability to River Road to handle ingress and egress off the site. Those are the types of conversations that typically occur when developers are building larger scale projects, and particularly those that are negotiated. I think on a go-forward basis, there's going to be less development. The town is, at least in its current boundaries, is largely built out, but there are a fair number of undeveloped properties on the island itself, and there are a handful of parcels over on Freshfields Village, and we need to just make sure that we're thinking the right way about those kinds of issues. The short answer is no. Kind of radio silence. Now that's in the county, of course. And I don't know, John. I don't think we've heard anything more recently, have we? The last conversation, we had a conversation with Andel West some months ago, and but they were interested in resuscitating a conversation with the town about a new roundabout at the entrance to the Andel West property. And that occasioned a conversation about, well, whether in fact that was necessary, what would be the design of that, cost associated and all. But at the time, what we learned, the town learned, is their current set of plans for Andel West were significantly different than those that had been negotiated with the community, a couple years prior. And that included just kind of phase one, not Restaurant Row or anything, but just the Harris Theater and a couple of other buildings, moving the fuel center from right by Kiawah Island Parkway, well buffered, back by the grocery store. We also learned that the grocery store, in any event, was not planned to come online till 2029. And there was also going to have to be a huge amount of earth moved in, much like you saw at Seafields, that across that entire parcel. Again, that was 3 or 4 months ago. Have not heard anything since then. Oh, there was also, I think very importantly from the community standpoint, at that juncture there was still no agreement between Edens and the property developer with respect to connecting Freshfields, because the number one issue that the community had raised is to make sure that those were seamlessly integrated and not just have a separate point of ingress and egress into a standalone development.
So I have 2 follow-ups to Jim's question about the resort. One's for Kevin, one I think is for you, Brad. And part of this, Kevin, I'm not sure my understanding's correct, so this is a baseline question. I think the resort, let me just give the advertisement for the resort. I think they're a great steward in our community, and they have something like 12% of the interest in KICA. So they are the big dog at this point. They are the largest single member. Putting that aside, it's my understanding that the golf course acreage is not subject to assessment at all. So their assessments look large by comparison to each individual homeowner, but that they still have an exception from their assessments and aren't assessed on any of the realty that makes up the golf courses. Do you know if that's true?
Looking at Shannon.
That is
Shannon's
true.
saying that is how it's calculated.
Okay. So, for example, the golf course clubhouse.
Yeah.
So for Osprey, none of the golf course, just the
Just
clubhouse.
the clubhouse.
Okay. All right. Right.
And that's in the general or the KICA covenants? KICA covenants.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure. So it would require a covenant change to change their formula.
Correct.
Okay. Brad, my question for you is probably the predictable one. I believe we are at a point where we, the town, should be negotiating a new development agreement with the resort. Am I right on that?
As I've indicated publicly, the town is at very preliminary discussions regarding a potential new development agreement with the resort. It's kind of in early stages. It's not even at a point where there's really any detail to be gotten into. In any event, what would come out of that process is a discussion between the resort and the town administration would be simply trying to come up with a framework for a development agreement that could be proposed or recommended to the Planning Commission to go through that whole public process, and then ultimately, potentially, recommended by the Planning Commission to the council that would then go through that review process.
I just have a quick question for Kevin. Could you give us a brief overview of what is happening with the ARB takeover and where that process is? Because, curious, but haven't heard much about it.
Yes, the short answer is nothing. Jordan sat in this room, Jordan from the Kiawah Partners, I think 2 years ago about and said they were prepared to turn it over. And at that time we said we want to finish our planning. We did a 3-part process, and we have a very good plan, I think, for the association to take over the ARB, and that's where it stopped. We've been in contact. To date, they've been unwilling to cede control of the ARB to KICA, and I think we are looking at what other options we can take. Unfortunately, it's kind of dead in the water, but we are talking about it this week. So,
Paul, before that, and I want to touch upon the ARB issues as well, but staff's informed me that I was not misspoke, I was simply incorrect. Turns out we do have a lighting ordinance, 215 lighting control, and it is 11 p.m. So thank you for...
Wait, all lights have to be off at 11?
11. It's too small for me to read. I don't know whether it's all year round or just at a certain point. Okay.
There's some extra language with that has to do with access and...
Okay. So, my bad. Thank you for staff for correcting the record. I just want to touch upon the ARB issues. You know, those are predominantly issues related to the general covenants, only tangentially to the KICA covenants. That is, private covenants, the enforcement of private covenants that every property owner is bound by that run with the land. We don't need to belabor here or get into a debate or discussion about what is actually covered or what the scope of those private covenants are, but nonetheless, that's a private covenant matter. What the town, which I'd previously indicated, the town is now moving forward with, is to establish its own design review board. And that's actually on the, I think will be on the agenda for this upcoming council meeting.
For multifamily commercial?
Multifamily commercial only at this juncture. That's not to say that that couldn't change at some future point in time. The reason it was limited to multifamily and commercial was, quite frankly, that the expectation was, at the very least, residential was going to be transitioned to the community association. So, the bottom line is we're going to move forward so that there is another set of eyes and ears. That right now there's an unfortunate situation that's existed where there's a clear conflict of interest. And architectural control of the developer's own properties is determined by itself, and with largely predictable outcomes in some respects in that regard. So that's what this design review board is designed to address. So at least future commercial development, whether on island or in the rest of the town, I'm not pointing at you, Seafields, that there would be an ability for the community's views to be reflected in that process. So I think we'll be moving forward that in fairly short order. Now, I'm sorry, Paul.
You answered my question, thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Meredith, nothing online yet? Wow, okay. Well,
thank you.
I guess it's. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Okay.
Oh.